Okay, so I'm doing the condenser on a 2001 Ford Taurus. It was leaking out the Freon pretty quick. It wouldn't even last overnight. It would blow cold right away, and then less than probably 12 hours, less than 12 hours, it would be out. I put in some UV dye and looked around in there and wasn't really seeing anything. I was looking through, I looked through the bumper, followed all the lines around, wasn't really seeing anything. I was kind of seeing a little by where you hook it up, but I figured it was just when I was putting it in. I changed the Schrader valves just to be sure, and that really didn't do anything. So I figured, oh, it's probably the evaporator. So pulled the dash, changed the evaporator out, and then it looked pretty decent in there. I was kind of smelling some Freon through the vents, so I thought maybe it'd be the evaporator, but pulled it out and it wasn't looking too bad in there. But changed that anyway. Still had a leak, wouldn't hold vacuum. So I've changed the condenser, and I've been sitting here over half hour, hasn't moved a single point, so it's looking pretty good. You can rent a vacuum pump, AutoZone, for 150 bucks, and then you get your money back. You're gonna need some vacuum gauges, which you can get for under 30 bucks on Amazon. Here's the condenser. It's pretty easy. You got 4 bolts where it hooks in, and then 2 lines. The lines are just bolts too, which make it pretty easy. It's not the fittings or anything. So all you do first, you're going to want to take this cover off, which is, it was a bunch of 5.5 millimeter bolts and a bunch of 8 millimeter bolts. Just look around there, take them all out. That'll come out pretty easy. And then you're going to go through up here. There's 2 access ports both sides. The top bolts, which are 8 millimeter, I believe, and then 8 millimeter. You just go through. Down here you'll find the other bolts. There was just one that held this tube on this side, and it held that in. And then over here you have one bolt that holds the tube on there, and then one that mounts it. So there's 2 at the bottom there you probably want to take out just to make that loose. So you just get the 4 corners there. You pull the lines off. Make sure you take the pressure off first. If you're changing your condenser, you probably got a leak, so there's probably not much Freon in there, but you'd want to hook up a pump first and take it to a vacuum before you do this. Just keep all the pressure off and everything. So, and then you'll pull the lines off, which is pretty easy. It's just 2 bolts there. I think they were 10 millimeter. But the thing was, on the original one, it had had the nuts that were just on there that were mounted on the condenser. And then when I got a new one, it didn't have the stems to put the nuts on, so I needed bolts. Luckily I keep a big box of bolts from when I swapped an engine over, so I was able to find 2 in there that worked good. But just be aware, you might have to find 2 bolts. I tried unscrewing the stems out of the original condenser, but it just stripped out and wouldn't turn those out. So, but luckily I found those bolts. It's about this size. That's not the one I used, but that probably won't help you, but something like that. These were I believe for an exhaust manifold. That was the size of the stem. I actually had bolts that had, a fixed head to it that just screwed in, which worked well. It actually had bolts in there holding a cover on the new one, but they weren't long enough. You could use them as a guide to show you how long they are. I mean, the thread. You could take it to a hardware store or something. But yeah, all you have to do is take those bolts, and then I tied a rope to pull that this tube right there out of the way, just to hold it out of the way, and then just kind of work it out. pretty simple, and you know, just work it back up there. Be careful not to bend any fins. And yeah, then once you got it back in there, just tighten everything down. You might want to put a little bit of oil around your O-rings on your fittings when you're putting it back in, and then just pull a vacuum with your pump, let it sit a while, and then hopefully you won't drop any pressure. Charge it up and you should be good. Alright, leave a like, subscribe.